Okay, well, it's a couple of minutes past the hour, so why don't we go ahead and get started? So, hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Active Planning for a Changing Manufacturing Landscape. I'm Stan Pinnell from Revelwood, and Revelwood is an adaptive planning platinum business partner. A few quick notes as we get going. Today's event is being recorded for future viewing, and we can send a copy of these slides after the event for your viewing. We should be finished in about 45 minutes, and during that time, all attendees will be muted. However, if you have a question, please type them in the Q&A section. We will try and answer them as we go along, but if we don't, we can certainly answer them afterwards or follow up with answers after the webinar. We know that some of you on this call are here out of curiosity or general education, and some are here because you have an initiative in this area. Either way, we would appreciate you taking just 15 minutes with us over the next week or so to have a quick chat regarding the webinar and your experience. So in the next day or so, myself or one of my colleagues will be reaching out to you with a 15-minute meeting invite. We hope to get your feedback and just have a brief conversation regarding your experience. Today's Revelwood presenters, I am Stan Pinnell, Revelwood Senior Account Executive. I have over 15 years of experience selling FBNA solutions to manufacturing organizations like yourselves. Also today, Lee Lazaro, Revelwood's Planning Practice Leader. Lee has over 20 years of FP&A consulting and implementation experience. And also Alberto Canas, Revelwood's Pre-Sale Solution Consultant. Alberto has 5.5 years of experience in the FBNA space, specifically helping organizations with improving their budgeting, planning, and forecasting capabilities. Today's agenda. So first, I'll take you through an overview of Revelwood. Then I'll take you through an overview of the Workday Adaptive Planning Solution Platform. Next, I'll pass it to Lee, who will take you through a discussion regarding FP&A and manufacturing. Then Alberto will provide us a very detailed manufacturing demonstration of the adaptive platform. If time permits, we'll then talk about considerations that you look to select and implement the adaptive planning solution or a planning solution. And then last but not least, we'll talk about potential next steps. So first, about Revelwood. Revelwood is an award-winning Workday Adaptive Planning Platinum partner with hundreds of successful FP&A implementations with all types and sizes of companies. Been in business since 1995, so over 25 years. We're also a part of Workday's Select Partner Program for the SMB market. That's one of 6 partners across North America that was selected to work in the SMB program. And then last but not least, we have a very deep and long experience with working with manufacturing organizations like yourselves. So let's talk a little bit about the Workday Adaptive Planning Platform. This is a platform that allows every functional organization within your company to plan, including finance, sales, marketing, operations, HR, and any of the other specialty departments that you may have. The Adaptive Planning Cloud Solution is a platform designed for active planning across the functions of your organization. We offer solutions for finance, sales, HR, and operations to enable company-wide planning. The Workday Planning Cloud was built from day one with a multi-tenant in-memory engine so that you always get the best performance and scale you need in real time. Absolutely no batch processing is required or needed with this platform. It provides modeling, reporting, and analytics all done on the platform, doesn't require separate apps or data transfers between systems. And with the data integration framework, business users, not just IT, can integrate any data source from your transactional systems, ERP, CRM, payroll, even Excel files, allowing you to maintain a single source of the truth on the platform. And because we believe everybody plans, the Business Planning Cloud is built for business users with little to hardly any reliance on the IT organization. Adaptive has had tremendous growth with over 5,200 customers worldwide. That represents 3 times more than any of the other competitors in the marketplace. Adaptive serves customers of all sizes across a very wide range of industries. This is just a sample of some of the key industries that we serve. If you look in the right-hand corner, specifically with manufacturing clients of ours, because of our strong balance sheet and cash flow functionality within the platform, we work well for big capital-intensive industries like manufacturing and industry. In fact, here's an example of a manufacturer, Zagg Industries, who was able to save $8 million in their first year of using Adaptive simply by fixing freight issues. So we've seen many different manufacturing organizations get up to speed on the platform quickly and very, very quickly recognize ROI on their investment. Workday is a highly rated planning solution, highly rated by Gartner, Forrester, and other third-party entities. Adaptive is in the upper right leaders quadrant of the Gartner Magic Quadrant with extremely high customer satisfaction. In fact, Adaptive has a 97% customer satisfactory rating from its customers. And as part of Workday, Adaptive is ranked #1 on Fortune's Future 50 list, which ranks global companies with the best prospects for long-term growth. As you can see from the chart here, tremendous growth, very stable, very proven platform that's well regarded by the independent research community. So with that quick overview of the Workday Adaptive Planning Platform, I will now pass it on to Lee to discuss FP&A and manufacturing.
Thanks, Dan. So let's start out by talking about the basics of FP&A. In essence, what does FP&A do? Well, FP&A can be summarized as performing the planning, the reporting, the analysis that helps to support all corporate decisions. And these tasks are really broken down into 4 main categories. Planning. So in essence, this is really what we think about as our budgeting. And when you focus on the budget, we focus on a lot of the different aspects, but many of our clients focus specifically on the income statement. So when you think about the income statement, when you think about the P&L, there's really 2 parts, the top half and the bottom half. The top half, the revenue. This is where we want to think about our revenue and our COGS. From a revenue perspective, most of our clients are trying to keep it somewhat simple when they do their budgeting. They really follow one of 2 approaches. Driver-based. This is where I may want to say, I'm selling X amount of units, I'm selling it at Y dollars, let me just multiply X times Y, and that comes up with my revenue dollars. And we also have organizations that want to do it at more of a higher level where they just want to do a % growth. Last year I sold $1 million, this year I expect it to go up 5%, let me see what those numbers are going to come out to be. And based on the fact that we're manufacturing, we also have a COGS component. And COGS is really broken down into 2 parts, the variable and the fixed. Variable, once again, is more driver-based. It's more unit-based. If I'm selling 1,000 units, I know that my COGS variable is going to be $1 per unit, and I could come up with some kind of calculation. But on a fixed amount, when you have rent, when you have certain numbers that you know are going to come out, and it doesn't matter how many units you provide, that's where the fixed amount comes in. So we think about that on the budgeting side. And then when we shift down to the bottom half of the P&L, we look at our expenses. And I like to break our expenses down into really one of 2 categories. Calculated and not. Calculated. This is where we're giving some kind of a formula, some kind of a granular detail. Compensation and benefits by person. Maybe what I want to do is I want to define every one of the people in the office, and within that office, I want to say Johnny makes $50,000 a year. I want to figure out how do I spread those out over the months, and then once I figure that out, I want to think about bonuses and commissions and taxes and other aspects that impact my company. Another example of that is depreciation. In the manufacturing plant, you've got a lot of items. You got a lot of pieces out there that you know you're going to be depreciating down. Most of our organizations want to try to keep it somewhat simple. They think about more like straight line depreciation, and they simply just want to say, this item's worth $1 million. The building's worth $1 million. I depreciated over 20 years. Let me figure out what my monthly depreciation cost is. And those are a couple examples of calculations that we're going to do where it's by something. But we also know there's a lot of other expenses that I'm simply just going to put a number down by GL account. My administrative costs, some of my management costs, anything else on the OpEx. And this is where we want to think about our budgeting. And we also don't want to forget about the other aspect of it, the balance sheet. So we also want to think about how do we balance our budget sheet. We want to think about our AR. We want to look at our rate, our AR, our range. We want to look at, DSOs for AP, things like that. This is where we want to think about our budgeting. But then the second half, the second piece of FP&A is where we want to update that budget. We want to do our updated planning. And in essence, this is really what we call our forecasting. It's where we're going to merge actuals into those plans. Right now, we're in the middle of September, so we most likely, if we're a calendar year, we've got 8 months completed. We're doing some kind of an 8+4. If it turns out we're going to do monthly reforecasting, we want to take those 8 months of actual, and then we want to plan for the next 4 months. If we do quarterly reforecasting, we probably want to wait until September's closed, and then we can do a Q4 forecast, which is 9 months of plan, and then one value for the next quarter. And maybe sometimes what we want to do is we want to annualize numbers. So instead of looking at how am I going to do for the next 4 months, let me do some kind of an annual number and figure out, maybe we go in reverse. How much do I have left? Or maybe we just want to say I've spent 3/4 of my year. Let me multiply it by another percentage and come up with an annual number. And when we're forecasting, the goal of this is to be a little bit quicker. So we want to think about it at different levels. Maybe on the accounts, instead of looking at it by individual account or even breaking it down to individual line item, maybe we want to think of it more of a bucket approach. I don't want to look at account 601, 602, 603. Maybe I just want to figure out what do I think my compensation is going to be next month. And when we look at our rates, maybe we don't necessarily want to come up with some kind of a unit cost if we're doing a driver. Maybe we want to do it more of a weighted average. I don't care if I'm going to give a sale in December. I'm not going to look at October, November, December independently. Maybe I just want some kind of a weighted average. And I also want to bucket together maybe my times. We just gave a couple of examples of thinking about the rest of this year. Maybe I'm doing my forecast quarterly or as opposed to doing the monthly, but maybe I also want to think long-term. On the long-term aspect, this is where you have the ability to do 2, 3, 5-year plans. We even have one organization that works in the entertainment industry that does a 20-year plan. It's part of their business model. So this aspect of forecasting gives us the ability to take that detailed budget and continue to reanalyze it. And then what do we want to do with those values? Then what we want to do is we want to take a look at the data. This is also where our actuals come into play. This is where we think about our financial reports. And we've got our big three. We've got the income statement, or depending on what you call it, the P&L. We've got our balance sheet. And then when you put the two of those together, then we've got our cash flow. But now we want to start thinking about the granularity of the reporting. This is where that word by comes into play, BY. I want to be able to think of my reports by department, by branch, by location, by cost center. Maybe if I'm looking at my compensation, I want to look at it by person, by specific tax. Maybe I want to start doing my sales analytics by product, by region, by all of those aspects. And we can put those all together. And the most important part, once we have the three of those aspects, my budget, my updated forecast, a series of reports, now we can analyze it. This is where we want to start looking at our comparisons. Actual versus plan, actual versus forecast, plan versus forecast. And we want to look at our variances. We want to look at it in dollars and percentages. Maybe we want to have a little bit of traffic lighting, or we want to try to figure out trending and pieces like that. And as we're looking at the trends and as we're looking at the seasonality, this is where we want to do two types of analytics. What happened and what's going to happen. What happened? Think about it historically. I want to see the seasonality. I want to see the trend, especially in a year like this. At the very beginning of the year, we had a budget. Then COVID hit. And it's very realistic that everything went awry. Everything from our numbers to our seasonality to our trends. And this all helps us put it together to think about the future. Okay? And how do we think about the future? This is the best part about doing the FP&A aspects. This is the what if. And we typically recommend that we're going to break it down into a few different what ifs. We definitely don't want to limit ourselves to a single plan. Variables happen, things change. We want to use this to create multiple plans. And this is where we recommend three. Best case, worst case, most people think of it that way. But the third one that we recommend, the most likely case. And this gives us the ability to evaluate a series of potential outcomes and plan for those eventualities. Okay. But this is where FP&A comes in. Finance is a centerpiece to every aspect of this. If you think about it, finance is the person who's going to be organizing all this, and you're going to want to meet regularly with every one of your stakeholders, every one of your functional owners. If you look at the various aspects of this picture, think about it in HR. You want to talk to HR and figure out your personnel, hirings and layoffs, and unfortunately lately furloughs. This is also where you want to think about raises and bonuses and aspects like that. On the sales side, this is the top half of your P&L. This is where you want to figure out, what are my revenues? How are they going to impact my COGS? How do I come up with numbers to make sure that my P&L is going to be positive? On the IT side, in today's world, this is a webinar. Many of us are working from home. As a result, IT is even more important, and as a result of that, IT has even more costs that come into play. Subscriptions, equipment, support, pieces like that. And really, your main goal is to figure out, how often do I talk to this team? The frequency is tied to how quickly those facts are changing, and how quickly, and this is the big part right here, how quickly you can turn those facts into actionable intelligence. If you can't turn the facts around quickly, then the result might be out of date by the time you put it all together. So the ultimate goal of what we want to do on the FP&A side is to make sure that we are able to plan quickly, report quickly, and focus our time in analysis. But from an FP&A perspective, we realize that manufacturing is different. There's a lot of different things associated with the manufacturing world as opposed to just standard FP&A. Your accounting approach, the overall accounting approach is different. For those of us who went to school and had an accounting degree, there were separate classes associated with GAAP versus cost accounting. In a GAAP world, we learn how to put together the P&L. We learn how to take our accounts and bucket our compensation and bucket our rent and bucket our utilities. But in cost accounting, we, depending on how you look at it, either simplify it or make it more complicated, because there's only three main buckets that we're going to look at. We're going to look at our direct materials, our direct labor, and then the biggie, we're going to look at all of our overhead. So we want to do accounting different. We also want to think about our timing, because there's different rules associated with manufacturing versus normal GAAP. For those of you who keep up to date, we used to recognize our revenue when the contract was signed. But in 2019, there was a new GAAP update, and really what it said is we want to change when you recognize that revenue. We want to recognize it when the goods and services are transferred, not necessarily when it's signed. You may want to have two different sets of books as a result of that. The costs, we just talked a little bit about it in the earlier bullet, but your costs are broken down a little bit differently. It's not necessarily just a list of expenses, but now you want to differentiate your COGS and your OPEX. And now you have things like volume, especially when you're looking at an owner-driver approach. You want to take these volumes and you want to figure out some of the pieces. Break-even calcs. I know that I have fixed COGS. I know that I'm going to have certain expense. How many units do I have to sell just to make sure that I'm at a zero, just to make sure I'm not in the red? And we want to do a series of metrics. We want to look into various per unit. We also want to think differently about our organization. On the inventory side, we want to bucket our inventories a little different. Just like we bucketed the accounting approach, we want to bucket our inventory. We want to put it in categories for our raw materials, for our WIP, our work in process, for our finished goods. And we want to see the flow. We want to do some cost analytics. We want to think about different formulas, the depreciation. I had said earlier that most of our organizations use straight line. In the manufacturing world, you have a different approach. Maybe we want to depreciate based on the units of production. This gives us different formulas, different mechanisms that we can associate into your organization. Compensation. Maybe we don't necessarily just want to figure out the fact that Johnny makes $50,000 a year, but for the actual shifts itself, maybe we want to do shift planning. Maybe we want to think about that. We also want to think about the supply chain, so the shipments and transportation. We want to think of it both ways. We want to think about the ins and the outs, the sourcing and the transportation. Now, some of you may have heard the story of UPS. UPS, their routes are designed to have drivers take right-hand turns at all times, unless they're left. You have no choice, unless it's unavoidable. But as a result of doing something that simple, by turning the right hand as often as possible, the company claims that it uses 10 million gallons less fuel per year and delivers 350,000 more packages every year. Just by analyzing your transportation gives you that opportunity to do some cost savings. Production scheduling. This is also eventually going to lead to machine usage and downtime and repairs and maintenance and pieces like that. Offshore and domestic, and this is going to bring us right back to the financial world. It's going to bring us back to some of the currency aspects that may come into play if we have a supply chain that's not domestic. We also realize that we're going to do different calculations, different metrics. We want to think about some of these aspects, such as metrics that are going to impact our product, our manufacturing cycle time, from the order of the product release. And we also want to think through the approaches behind WIP and the finished goods and various analytics from that. Okay. The absorption. Not only do we want to think about this as a metric, in essence, not only do we want to think about how do we account for these fixed costs? Are they going to be allocated into the period when the product is produced, or are they going to get allocated when the product is sold? But this also impacts our financials, because if we allocate it when the product is produced, it makes it into an asset for the next period, as opposed to some of the other approaches. We want to think about compliance and regulatory metrics, and we want to think about comparatives. How does this come to OSHA averages? Are we meeting all of our criteria? We want to think about cost and profitability. Manufacturing costs as a percentage of revenue, and this is where we use that word buy again. We want to think about our manufacturing costs by product, by plant, by business unit, and look at each one of those aspects to determine how they are as a percentage of our revenue. We also want to think about revenues per unit, revenue per employee, other pieces. But this is just an addition, because remember, we still have all the standard financial metrics, such as EBITDA and expense to revenue ratios and pieces like that. Adaptive planning helps companies with all the tasks that we just reviewed. So I'm now going to turn this over to my colleague, Alberto, and he can show you how.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you everyone for joining. Give me 1 second. Here we go. So you should be able to see right now the adaptive webpage, homepage, where everyone will have access to the moment they log on to a tool. So essentially, what I'm going to walk you through is just to kind of show you how organizations, including manufacturing organizations like yourselves, are utilizing the solution by creating and using different sheets to define and plan for all the different aspects of your budget. Most organizations are utilizing Excel, so it's going to have some familiarities there as I walk you through it. So let me actually show you really quickly some of those different concepts. So here you'll just see some of the key areas that make up the solution. I'm currently logged in as an administrator, so I have full access rights, but a lot of organizations, they want to include their various department heads and other contributors into the budget process, but with potentially restricted access, just for areas that they're responsible for. So this could be extremely limited and restricted to just what those people need to see and have access to. But now let me just guide you through some of those key areas that might be really beneficial for organizations, especially again manufacturing organizations. So this is one type of sheet that organizations can really utilize to plan for, in this instance, product revenue. This is one style of a sheet. There are different types that have different nuances that you'll be able to take advantage of. But here, it's not just about being able to plan and budget by things like your location, your organizational structure, things like that. You also are able to budget by more detail, like your customer base. Maybe you have different products that you in product lines, and even below that, maybe by different attributes, things that might give some more emphasis and more detail to what you want to look at. Maybe you have different machines that kind of drive different pieces of the revenue. They have different sizes, colors, right? Those are more for the products and such, but those are just some generic examples. Adaptive planning is really customizable, so really just you'll be able to model it depending on how you want to look at it. But in here, you really have a lot of capabilities to make it look exactly the way you want to. This particular sheet is really customizable in the way that you can, just move things along different axes. As I go in here, you'll see, how the sheet just updates for you, and you'll have a different perspective how a user can look into it, as you can see it right there. If we want to go down to a lower level, we can just search for that level or that department, location, whatever you need. You'll have that detail right there. So now you'll be able to go in and really just focus on those details and kind of update it as you go along. Or if you even want to look at the information in a little bit more, structured way to give you everything all in one place, right? So let me actually pull this back up a little bit and show you another nice key piece here. What if you actually want to include another dimension into the screen? So this change dimension capability allows you to that flexibility, and you can see it there. Now you have all those pieces, be able to look at that by your products, by your customers, all in one place. So it just gives you a lot more, capabilities there. You also, if you want to, play around with different driver-based, budgets, that's part of your process. Here's just a sales driver sheet that allows you to define all those pieces all in one, centralized location. You can see it right in there. You have your prices per unit, materials, labor costs, overhead, freight, you name it. It's all up to you how you want to really customize that to fit your particular, needs and wants. And again, each sheet can have its own particular dimensions and attributes within it. Group here as opposed to customer in the other sheet that I just kind of came from. Then you have another type of sheet here where you can even include things where you're entering all your different overhead expenses by the organization. You'll even have the ability to utilize allocation capabilities in this part of the solution and throughout, where costs can be allocated across different parts of the organization, maybe even by other dimensions, like maybe by products, or maybe again you have certain expenses that have to be allocated across, maybe again, as I mentioned, machines or something like that. So again, sky's the limit as to really what you want to include within your particular plan. And in here, let me actually drill this down once more to that lower level, just to show you very simply how a user can go in and enter some numbers and taking advantage of some really key capabilities. As you can see here, maybe these numbers actually have to be, just type over them as you go. Maybe you just want to have this number fill in the rest of the way, highlights right in. Maybe you just want to start with the final number. Simple as that. Brings up this breakback method, which allows you to just define that annual amount and the solution will fill it in, but also has a built-in intelligence to know that this is a forecast version. We have 1 month of actuals, so it's going to subtract that month of actuals and then drive those numbers as well. So very, very slick how that can work for you. But it's really gives you a lot of visibility as well. You have the calculation capabilities, as you can see right in here. These blue tick marks really represent that these are based on some calculations. Up here, you can even see what that calculation is, what I just highlighted. But the real takeaway here is that the terminology, the way you actually, the language you're using in here is custom to you. This is a generic way of looking at the account, but this is telling you what the calculation is. It's based on an account for FTE times some kind of an assumption that we have, or a driver that you want. So it's as simple as that, but it doesn't have to be some kind of elaborate coded way of looking at that. It's really just custom the way you want it to look. But that just gives you some nice context there, how you want to incorporate that detail into the solution. And of course, you have different aspects that you want to look at it. Maybe you want to take advantage of some display options where it's not just a 1-year plan, right? Most organizations need to do a forward outlook, 5 years, 10 years sometimes. Here you can see we have a few years into the future. You can also bring in as many years of history as you want to. So then you can even compare your versions as you're working. Maybe look at your actuals versus your plan. Definitely gives them some nice insight as you the users are working through the solution. So it definitely gives you some nice context there. And then being able to utilize some of the really powerful capabilities. For me, really key and one of the best things that you'll have available to you is how you can take advantage of this explore cell capability. This allows the user to instantly have some line of sight into what is making up these numbers that you have. All right, so here you can see this is the amount. We click into it. Anything that's blue is just something that you'll be able to keep drilling down. So you can see this 44,000 is really just based off of the salary of all of these people, which then brings you into the workforce plan. So this is another type of sheet. So this is where most users will define, their personnel, their people. And this is a little different, still similar in that Excel capability, but a little different. This is more, specific to working by different dimensions. That's very common as to how, people in HR, which are usually responsible for this, work. You can see you're budgeting by people, by the employee names. If you want to include things like titles, maybe you have employees that are in different locations, so in different states, if you will. So this allows you to really take advantage of, some of that detail and that granularity to be able to really just drive those impacts specific to those capabilities. And it's just a drop down. It just gives you that view that it's all pulling from another part of the solution, supporting schedule, as we like to call it. But when it comes to, things like start dates, end dates, because we have that built-in time that you can also customize, you can definitely play around with, start dates, especially, taking into account what's happening nowadays, right? Where maybe initial plan, you had, the idea of starting every, 10 more heads, but now as things happen, maybe you have to delay them, maybe remove them. So the solution allows you to include and create unlimited versions where you can define these different scenarios, best cases, worst cases, where you're playing around with these different pieces. If you have certain types of employees that maybe are seasonal in nature, or maybe just temporary, you can define end dates. So those are just a lot of granularity that you have. Full-time equivalent to define what the hours are, all the different benefits, right? If you have your sales folk that have to get commissions and bonuses. Maybe you have certain individuals that I think I mentioned previously. They might work across different projects or locations, or maybe even within, maybe working by different, machines, right? So their time is going to be split. You can see this particular example of William Clark. That person is actually split between the sales north and the sales south, and there's a 60-40 split, but it doesn't actually have to be that clean. It could be, have a lot more people, or should I say a lot more levels, to just give it that more granularity. But this is really the powerful capability that this part of the solution has. So now this next piece here is just a P&L type of sheet. This sheet actually allows you to now take all the different sheets, organize them, and sum them up, all that data in this one area. It's all just pulling. Again, it's all grayed out because it's all coming from those supporting schedules. But at the whole, this is broken down by different levels. As you can see, again, you'll be able to just drill down to where you need to look at it. So it's all just pulling in together. Workflow. Right. So at the end of the day, you'll be able to even define, as your budget contributors are working within the solution, they'll be able to submit their budgets for review. You'll be able to go in and, accept them, reject them, depends on how you're defining that detail. But this just gives you that nice little capability to include that process into your budget. And then, of course, we get into some of the dashboards, right? That's of course, you have reporting capabilities throughout the solution. This is just one aspect that allows you to just quickly get some dashboards, some really good looking reports, for your presentations. You have some summary reports, maybe you have budget reports. It's not just about the financial details. Sometimes it's critical to bring in information from, non-financial information from, like, say, your CRMs, as you can see here, sales, metrics, production, as well as a kind of was talked about a few moments ago. You can even layer in things like, downtime. Who really thinks about that kind of real granularity? Well, Adaptive gives you that kind of flexibility. If you ever thought about that, definitely will be able to do that here. Right? So really key there. And in here, you'll even be able to see a little bit more detail as you click into these items. Click right into it. You instantly are able to drill down into the various aspects to see what it looks like. And you can even take advantage of that explore data capability that I mentioned a few moments ago, that instantly gives you that data, that line of sight to what makes that up, right? So here you can see that particular revenue is all coming from company A. Keep following the bouncing ball. Keep going down. That's coming from operations. And now you can see all the various areas that have some of that data. And then we'll just pick into the US, and now you can see the levels. Keep clicking into it. Now you're going to see it by customer. Click down into that. Now you want to see it by product. So again, a lot of options there to give you that instant visibility to what you want to potentially look And then even if you want to look at some more information here, right, you can see a lot more detail, how you can go right into some of these areas here, right? So you can see, maybe you want to look into your operating expenses, you can, same thing, click right into it, explore the data, and you still have all that line of sight to what makes up that particular line item, that number as you go along. And as I mentioned, excuse me, now we have some reports here. These are more standard reports, but still give you a lot more granularity and a lot more visibility. These are all custom to how you want to look at this. This is more of a, very typical comparison report, comparing your actuals versus your budget. It gives you your variance, right, for year to date or just for that month. It's all up to you. You can see how we can even include some kind of conditional formatting, right? So things kind of pop out and show you where some of the variances are. And this is a really big variance. So to drill into it, to start looking at it, just click into that account number, and now you're going to have access to all those drill path capabilities, right? So maybe we just want to look at it by the level, department, organizational structure, things like that. And it instantly brings you into this report here. So very, very powerful, because if you're thinking about working in Excel reporting, you have to, if you want to look at this breakdown, you have to recreate the report. Then you probably have to fix all the different formulas and coding. Here it just keeps it at that structure because that's what you want, but it breaks it down for you, and it continues to show you where those details are. And now you can even do some additional digging in, because it doesn't just end here, right? It's not just about flagging that variance. You got to try to figure out where it's coming from. So you can click into these numbers in that Explore cell. Again, another reason why it's really powerful and one of my favorite aspects of the solution, because it's available throughout. So this is showing you exactly what it's coming from, right? So this is probably a very standard, calculation. This is telling you it's that account from last year times some kind of inflation driver or assumption. Pretty straightforward. But then, because of the integration capabilities that Adaptive does have currently, you're able to go into your actuals and start seeing what the transactions actually are. So now you can go right in there, and now you can see that these two items are actually hitting that particular account, right? $1,000 for an entertainment outing, $2,600 should have been booked for your company lunch, but accidentally 2.6 was booked for it. Most likely, just a fat finger or something like that. So this is something that usually would take a couple of days to maybe resolve, maybe just to research and then to fix. This way you instantly are able to see it because of that integration. And then you can go in and go right into your general ledger, make that change, and then instantly have the ability to change it, update your financials, and then reload those actuals into the solution. And that just keeps the ball rolling that much quicker, so you don't waste any time. So again, that Explore cell is really powerful because it gives you that line of sight throughout the solution instantly. But those are just some generic examples that I kind of wanted to share with you. Now let me actually kind of pivot back and kind of show you just some examples that might be relevant when it comes to manufacturing organizations. So let me bring you into this screen here. So with here, you'll see we have some information, different sheets, right? So right in here, we have some, one of those very similar sheets, because again, it's gonna be consistent no matter who is in it. That's the solution. We have this as a production sales inventory sheet. So you have still that flexibility to look at this information differently, right? You have, this is built by that level structure, by product, and as a dimension, and then other attributes as you have them there. So it's, again, built by level and by product. Then you can still drag and drop this information depending on how you want to look at it. So let's just bring in, let's bring in the level into the unit. So we'll just bring it right in there and let it kind of just do its thing. And you're going to see again how it's going to give you that perspective. That's going to just break it down a little bit more. So now I'm going to actually drag this product into this level here. So again, now that's going to specify a little bit more granular detail as to how you want to look at it. There it is. So now you can go right in, and now you have that, all your products. If you want to go in and make some adjustments, highlight those, adjust it, and now you'll be able to go in, give it a percentage increase, decrease, dollar amount, you name it, you'll be able to do that. So now let me actually reset this back so it's easy enough to just bring it back to how it was before. And then I'm just going to pull it back once more to the top of the house level, right? So if I go back into my level structure there and bring it back into that total company. So really, really key there how that could work for you. Okay. So at the end of the day, that's the flexibility that you'll have as you work along. And then again, you might have some more specific details, operational metrics that are going to be important to you and to your organization, right? By levels, by products, production, downtime, availability, rejects, right? Depending on if that's how you want to track certain information. And then you want to include, certain assumptions, right? So here you can see we have just standard costs, right? Cost, labor costs, material, overhead. Maybe you even have labor costs that are going to be more specific, not just high level. Here you can see the granularity. Maybe you need to incorporate the impacts of the taxes, benefits. Maybe you have union or non-union employees, so you can even get that specific here. So again, it's not just about being high level and just kind of guessing as to what the impacts are going to be. It's really about getting that nitty-gritty into what is important and what makes sense. Bill of material items, you have some of that flexibility. Even in this one, if you want to make it a little bit more specific by different, maybe divisions and those items as you go. So you definitely have some options. And again, some more, production kind of specific dashboards, as I mentioned before. It's all up to you what these are, and what they mean for you, and how you want them to look. Right, gross sales, how you want the operations and production. Right. So again, just 4 common examples, but really you'll be able to take advantage of these as you need. And of course, we have some reporting. And so standard reporting, this just gives you that view that it's not just about a financial statement. If you just want to see really quickly, your revenues and your COGS and that gross margin by your products, you have those right there. If you want to see it a little bit more, broken out a little bit more, as you can see in this one, this is by stats, different stats that you have at your disposal: units produced, materials cost per unit, freight, right? So sometimes you don't probably want to include these in your overall P&L income statement, but it's definitely important to see, this information and see how that's impacting and flowing. So now you can see things like that. And even as I mentioned, maybe you want to look at some reporting on some, union versus non-union. Again, a lot of granularity that might not be, needed for the overall, report, but definitely gives some nice insight, which then can help you drive some of your decisions in the future. So very, very powerful there. But at the end of the day, these are just a handful of examples that you have at your disposal. You'll be able to create all your book of reports, right? Your income statements, balance sheets, cash flows, have different styles and formats of them. So it's all really custom to how you want to manage that. And the last piece I wanted to highlight for you is really the Office Connect capability of the suite, right? Where you're able to really produce reports for your presentations, right? Your board reports, if you will. So let me bring you into that. So this is the first piece of Office Connect. You can obviously see that this is an Excel file, but it's a lot more powerful than that. And that is because we all know typical Excel reports are littered with links, formulas, things that will break down, especially when you want to make a change, even if the change is just from shifting from this month to next month when new information comes in. This is going to, you're going to avoid all of that with Office Connect. You can see right in here, when I click linked cells, everything that just got highlighted, that's what the information that's pulling from the solution. If I click into that one cell, you can see it's just a static number. So the solution is the engine of the car, if you will. It's the mothership. It brings everything into the into Office Connect with the linkage that it has. But what if now, as I mentioned, you want to start bringing in more information? This is showing you your actuals on a rolling basis. All these other reports as well, you're seeing the dates all following suit. So now, let me show you quickly. As I go in, let me extend this out because we now brought in April's numbers. And now I'm just going to refresh. So as it comes in, it's now knowing to pull the information. All the updates that happen in the solution are now going to feed in here. And also, they're going to feed throughout. So now you can see it shifted from October to November, and now it pushed or pulled March in, and now brought in April. And as I go into these other sheets or other tabs, all that information is there as well. But also, that Explore cell, you can see that right in here. Let me click into that. And that also brings that right in as well. So now you're going to see that Explore Cell dialog box pop up once this finishes running through it. And there you have it. So again, that Explore Cell is available throughout. Instantly, we'll be able to give you that drill down visibility to what you're actually wanting to look at. So now here, it's not just about working in Excel. Sometimes organizations need to, present in maybe a PowerPoint presentation. So it is all going to be linking, right? So you can see the dates, even these dashboards. So here I'm just going to refresh it. Instantly moved. April, all the numbers within the graphs also changed into April. And even if you have a Word document that has, your presentations, that you need to display, maybe quarterly, semi-annually, annually, you name it, you'll be able to do that. So as I scroll down, of course, you'll be able to, map in or embed your graphs or your charts, your reports into, that book of reports. You'll see them here. But the key with the linking of all the information to Adaptive is that some of this detail, you're not going to have to worry about making or searching and changing them as you go along. That's where the time kind of comes in. And sometimes, people miss things, and now you have to, do multiple ways or multiple steps to fix. Here, because it's all linked, let me show you. I'm just going to refresh this once more. It's going to do its thing. And you're going to see not just the information update and the months. So that's April. April changed in the actual language, and even it went from an increase for March to a decrease in April. So all that detail, and as you go along as well, as I move up, same thing. Everything is going to update. So that is a very important time saver that organizations that utilize the solution as a whole, right? Use the adaptive planning solution for the planning, the forecasting, and all the what if scenario capabilities, and just planning the whole the budget. Then being able to use dashboards, and then bring it all together to now see what you want it to look and how you want to present it to your board or to any management as well. So that is what I had that I wanted to kind of share with you folks. I do appreciate the time. And now I will hand it back over to Lee.
Great, thanks, Alberto. All right, and let me come back up to our deck where we left off. All right. So now that you've seen a sample of a model in action, the next steps are for you to think about how do you want to put your model into use? And this is where you start considering what kinds of pieces do you want to come into play for your specific model? Which metrics are applicable to your company? This is where you want to make sure you're including your components. For example, you can't calculate capacity utilization if you're not storing your available capacity somewhere. So think through, what are the metrics that you want to use? What are the pieces that make up that metrics? And let's make sure that we're able to get access to that data. We want to start thinking about the various analyses, what we often call the attributes. How do you want to separate and group your products? We just saw Alberto show you how we can dig into, and we could do what we often call slicing and dicing. But this is where you want to think about, how do you group your products? Maybe you want to keep it at some kind of a general level. Do I want to group them by category, by brand, something like that? Maybe I want it to be very detailed. Do you want to look at it by size, by color, by package type, etc.? You also want to think through, what's your overall planning approach? What are the calculations that you want to do? We talked earlier on in regards to multiple ways of revenue. How do you want to do your revenue? Do you want to do a driver-based plan? Do you want to do growth rate? How do you want to do your compensation? Do you want to do it by specific person, by average head count? How often do you want to do budgeting? How often do you want to do forecasting? Quarterly, monthly, weekly? Many organizations start with once a year budget, once a quarter forecast, but then when they realize how easy it is to put data into Adaptive, how easy it is to report and see the analytics that come out of it, they shift their quarterly down to monthly, and many of them shift it down to weekly. Think through, how do you want to do your planning with rates? When we know that we're looking at currency, we want to look into different average currency rates versus ending. Do you want to do the same thing with your unit pricing? Do you want to do the same thing with your COGS? Well, we want to look at this as an opportunity. This is a great opportunity. It's not just a way to replicate your existing process. This is a great opportunity for you to reassess your overall business. Think about your reports. Report recreation, it's a key task during the implementation. And this is your opportunity to go back and look at your reports. Think about what you really need. What we usually recommend as part of the preparation is organize your reports. Break it down into the must-haves. These are the things that need to be converted. These are the things that are required as soon as the system is active. Then you can break it down into your nice-to-haves. These are things that can be recreated over time, but they're not necessarily required for the go-live. But the hardest category, and in my opinion, the most important category these are the reports that can be eliminated. Okay? These are the reports that are redundant. These are the reports that don't really give any analytical value. Now, one example we had is during one of our implementations at the very beginning, a client told us they have over 1,000 reports that they had to be recreated. So we kind of sat down with them and said, let's think about this. We reviewed the reports, we optimized it, we merged what they had, and out of those more than 1,000 reports, we realized they only need 98 reports. We found that a lot of these reports were being produced, they had no business benefit, and sadly, there were a series of reports that people were creating, nobody was looking at it. One situation where, as part of this analysis, we went and asked the person, do you use that report that we create every month for you? And the answer was, I didn't even know you created it. This is a great opportunity for you to think about your reports and reorganizing. It's also a great opportunity to think about redefining your planning process. This is your ability to figure out what kind of details do you need. Am I putting in too many details and the process is taking a long time? Maybe I'm not putting enough because there was always some kind of metric that I wanted. One of our clients, they originally wanted to implement an approach that they planned by each individual contract. After running through a first pass, they decided that was far too granular, too hard for the users, so they ended up changing the process and making it more of a redesign of what kind of data gets put in. And by simplifying the amount of data, they found that they were able to still have the same results, still give the same metrics that came out at the end, but they were able to make their budgeting process go faster. They were able to reforecast at a much quicker rate. And that approach simplified their overall planning process. It made it from oh, do I have to do this again, into, hey, this is great. It's quick and it's easy and it gives us the information we need. This is also your opportunity to figure out your centralization. Do you want this to be more decentralized? Decentralized meaning, let me have other people do it. Maybe you're in a situation where you can have your end users do more data entry instead of just having a few people do the entry for everybody. It eliminates some of the redundancy. It allows you to not have to worry about typos. It allows your people who are in charge of their numbers to be in charge of their numbers. And more importantly, for all the people listening in right now, the FP&A team, it allows your main finance team to do more analytics, to do much more analysis of the results and a lot less data entry. We encourage you to learn more about Revelwood and our adaptive implementation approach by visiting our website at revelwood.com. While you're there, we also encourage you to visit our Knowledge Center, where we offer tips and tricks about all aspects of the business process. Technical tips on the tool, planning tips about the budgeting process, and various tips on other business aspects of your FP&A model. And now I'm going to turn this back to Stan to wrap things up.
Okay, thank you very much, Lee, and thank you, Alberto. Thank you, everyone, for attending Revelwood's manufacturing webinar today. Just a quick reminder that myself or one of my colleagues will be following up with you to schedule the 15-minute call just to gather your thoughts and any questions you may have around your experience with the webinar today. So thanks, everyone. Everyone stay safe out there, and we'll talk soon.